Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. And we've got a lot to talk about today on politics. We'll get to that in a minute, but I want to first thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for sponsoring these programs on the Senior Community Center. They offer assisted and independent living and memory care. And you can check out their beautiful campus up on Rolling Bay and ask about day stay and respite programs. And they'll even treat you to lunch. Call 206-594-1010. Ask for Celia or Jamie and check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. Also, I'd like to honor the people of the Suquamish Nation, the people of the Clear Salt Water, our neighbors to the north who have been living on these lands and waters since time immemorial. We are grateful for their stewardship and their hospitality to us today, and we continue to learn from them about how to be good partners with our environs. As I said, today we're going to be looking at politics, and with us to do that, as he does every month, is David Harrison, the founder of the Northwest Policy Center at the University of Washington. And we've got a few things to talk about. I know that usually we put together a list of three, David, and then work our way through it and stop for comments along the way.
So that's what we're going to do. I was going to quickly look up the date where we last talked, but it was certainly before Joe Biden's decision, although a lot of us at that call were thinking that that's what was going to happen. Apparently, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance weren't reading the papers because they seemed somewhat surprised.
Yeah, it was the 12th, and that was the last gasp for my earlier wager with you that Joe Biden was going to end up as the candidate for the Democratic Party. You now have won that wager, although it was a painful way to win, David.
I won the night before Joe Biden announced. I won another $5 by a guy who was so mad at me he was gasping for air that I would suggest that. So as some of you know, last year I said I didn't think Biden would be the candidate, but I never supposed that it would happen in July. I'm happy that it did because I felt that we didn't have any fluidity. It wasn't that Joe wasn't still close. I just didn't post-debate see that there was any way to turn around those swing states given the number of decided voters. The new news this morning shows you that we weren't in the outhouse, but we were close to it, and we're not in the penthouse yet or the White House, but we're a lot closer to it than we were. But this morning, Simone Biles tweeted, "I love my black job." So it just shows what's happening here. We got some momentum here that is special. And of course, it's from something that happened that is really the most surprising and kind of amazing thing to happen in American politics in the last 20 years. I think that is because for me, I know there's I thought Joe was a great president, but I was a little disappointed. When he decided not to run, there were a lot of comments on his service and his grace in withdrawing, but I was still disappointed that he didn't do it last November and let us have a full set of primaries. But I think what happened is, and I was especially disappointed because if he had blown the debate in September, it would have been too late to change candidates and we would have lost. And now we're at least even, if not in a slight lead. Nate Silver just changed his projection to both to a toss-up, and there's 7 or 8 polls where we're leading slightly, although, as you know, that doesn't cover the distribution in swing states. We won by 3 million votes 8 years ago, so that's not always good enough. At any rate, if Joe had announced last November, by now, if Kamala was the candidate, she'd be weary and kind of beaten up. So it turned out to be an advantage to just have a 115-day campaign because she's got incredible momentum, $300 million raised. And so the issue becomes, here's the issue. I used to play blackjack quite a bit, too much. And every time I ever played blackjack, if I was even a few $100s ahead, I would think I was the greatest blackjack genius in the world until the money was gone, the house took over the odds, and all of a sudden I had $40 and I was no longer a genius. And then I would think, oh, that's right. I'm not a genius. The odds are against me. So in this case, right now, with the momentum that we have, it seems like that Trump and Vance can't necessarily touch her. And that might prove to be untrue. So we just have to keep within ourselves and be pleased at our position. The change in our position in the last 3 months, it's remarkable. And we have to be pleased with that, but not think that we're chasing some inevitable outcome, because we're not. So I would just say that this is a little different than a lot of momentum is, because it so fits America at this moment. They didn't want 2 80-year-olds to run. They wanted a certain kind of positivism. It's a little wearing down of Trump's thing among independent voters. So the first issue is Kamala Harris's momentum automatically more sustainable because of where America is right now, and it's possible. The second, before I say the second, so we'll do 3 segments. We'll talk about the status of the Kamala race, then we'll have a pace-setting poll on who we think is going to be vice president, and then I'll say a little bit about the rules for how we support candidates, because I went to a coffee this morning, had coffee this morning with a guy who said, should I be sending money to Amy Klobuchar? She's really in trouble. You know, the last thing in the world person you should be sending money to is Amy Klobuchar. She's 15 points ahead. So we have to be wise about how we proceed. Anyway, first, could Kamala be in a situation that is more sustainable, the momentum that is clearly heading our way with $300 million new dollars? So could there be something about America today that makes it hard to defeat that momentum? And then the second issue is, are Vance and Trump uncommonly unable to understand the situation? So there are a couple pieces of evidence there. First, at a fundraiser, J.D. Vance called it a political sucker punch. As you know, what a sucker punch is somebody smashes you in the face and you don't know they're going to hit you. You have no chance of defending yourself. The trouble with calling it a sucker punch is everybody in the country knew that there was a possibility that Joe would withdraw. So rather than being a sucker punch, if you're the opposition, why not have a meeting where you convince yourself that it's going to be Joe, but at the end of the meeting, you talk a half an hour about what you're going to do if it's not? It's just crazy that they keep on testing these messages, and then even if they test them, Donald Trump wanders off and wonders whether Kamala is black or not. It's just crazy. So no less than Vivek Ramaswamy says after Biden decides not to run, a ton of Republicans call him to resign the presidency. And he writes a note to fellow Republicans and he says, you know, if he resigns the presidency, that would make our opponent the incumbent president of the United States. Is that a good idea? And then Nikki Haley writes a memo and says, could we stop calling Kamala Harris the DEI candidate because it's going to take the African American vote from 80% to Kamala to 90%. So there's some unforced errors. I guess what we need to think is first, Donald Trump knew when he went into that black journalist session that he was going to do that. It wasn't spur of the moment. The issue is whether he's coachable once he knows something like that. Not necessarily. It could be when he said that he was the second best president ever for African Americans in America, that he was being self-effacing. He put Lincoln ahead of him. So maybe that was an incredible act of modesty by Trump. I'm thinking that they are testing what will stick. And there is now a internal campaign memo to surrogates that says, at this point, we're going with ultra liberal from Berkeley. I mean, I think that's, if they end up deciding on what is most likely to stick, it's less likely to be immigration because Trump got that bipartisan Senate deal blocked. It's less likely to be immigration than it is that Kamala's unreconstructed radical. The problem with that, of course, is she was a prosecutor, which is an inconvenient truth for Trump and Vance. So let's talk about briefly the 5 things that could happen that would build upon her present momentum, assuming that she's about even or maybe a little ahead, and we got maybe a 4% or so, 5% post-Biden bounce. First, she could be boosted tremendously by not just the naming of the vice president, but the 7-state trip that she'll go on next week with that person, because all those rallies will be packed. You know that. It's all set up for that to happen. And so it could be that she'll get another couple points bounce just in the week ahead. The debate could boost her if there is one. The problem there is high expectations, because all of us think that because she was a prosecutor that she can handle him in a debate. Trump's physical and cognitive decline could become an issue. He made an issue before with Biden, and he's the one that's talking about Hannibal Lecter as a real person. Joe Biden tweeted and said, Donald, Hannibal Lecter was a fictional character. He's not a real person. Plus, he was a cannibal, because Donald Trump is speaking to him about him with admiration. The other thing that could happen is, as much as the Supreme Court has beaten down legal challenges, we could get a boost, if not from Tanya Chutkan's evidentiary hearings this fall. We could definitely get a boost from Juan Merchan sentencing Trump on September 18th, which may be a mistake from Trump, because Juan Merchan was ready to sentence this last summer. There's no chance that Juan Merchan's going to find that that sentence has to be vacated because of the immunity ruling, since 99% of the testimony in the trial was about his behavior before he was elected president. The issue is whether Hope Hicks and another staffer testifying is colluding, and Juan Merchan will find a way to just say that it's not. So those 5 things could give us a further boost over and above our present situation for those 4 things. And the 5th thing is our own organizing, because right now, the Kamala effort is got more energy behind it than the Trump effort. So what will the issues will be? Democracy, internationalism, whether now with Vance was the leader of the anti-Ukraine forces, funding forces in the Senate, whether that will become an issue. The border is an issue. The economy is an issue, but inflation is in much better shape. And of course, Kamala's one step removed from being Biden, so they can say all they want, the Biden-Harris ticket, but that's not the way the voters think about it. Even on immigration, it's not like independent voters across America are going to believe that Kamala is some kind of immigration czar. What could take us down? Well, that's the issue. It's not so clear. Back to my blackjack, you didn't see it coming. A bad debate would take us down. Expose about Kamala, something that we had no idea that was true. It couldn't be, it's not going to be that she was one for a single payer healthcare program or fracking in Pennsylvania or con. It's not going to be anything like that. If there was something amazing or bad VP choice would be problematic. Some expose about the VP choice, and we're about to see what our choice is. But that's pretty much it. So right now we're in excellent shape. As you know, the top 10 evidentiary hearings are not clear, but the Supreme Court gave her clear instructions on how she would sort out the indictments and possible testimony witnesses in the insurrection trial, voter fraud trial, to determine what were private acts and what were public official acts. And they were quite detailed on how she would do that. So that's not going to be any surprise to her. Amy Coney Barrett supervised that part of the ruling. It's not just her talking. Robert signed on to what that process looks like. So if that happens in September, it will be a nice thing. So comments, questions, thoughts, concerns about the general situation, and then we'll go on to the vice president issue.
I have one. So I'm wondering, you mentioned the radical Berkeley feminist. I don't know what they're going to throw. Do you think that to use an old term from the Clinton days, that there's going to be a Sister Soldier moment where Kamala is going to tell the left that they're going to have to live with her?
Well, I don't think the left is going anywhere. So,
like to reject these ideas that she's a radical leftist, are we likely to see her be forceful about something like, well, I know there's been a lot of complaints about the potential vice president candidate, Mark Kelly, being not a favorite of Labor's. Could she pick him anyway? That kind of thing.
That's exactly where we're heading, but self-evidently, every one of those 6 candidates is toward the center from Kamala. So, or anybody else you think of, Gretchen Whitmer. There isn't anybody that she's considering that would be to the left of her.
I expect her to move to the center, keep moving to the center.
Well, I mean, she's already said she's no longer for a single payer health system, which is all the rage when candidates were vying for progressive support 4 years ago. And she's changed her mind about fracking in Pennsylvania, so she's already done that. I don't know that she has to change positions on anything. She's got such a long record on for instance, somebody said after the murder of an police murder in Minnesota and Black Lives Matter, you said the following things. Do you disown what you said? Whatever you said about police funding or police behavior, she don't have to disown anything because she's been a prosecutor. So she can say, what happened in Minnesota was awful, and here is what I've done, as a prosecutor. So I think she'll be fine. Questions on, Sheila. You're muted. You're wise, even muted.
Oh, I noticed. Okay, thank you. I just noticed that Trump was pulled from the forum with the Black journalists. He was supposed to be up there for an hour and he was only there for half an hour. His handlers pulled him off. I wonder if they had a debate, whether they would end up pulling him off if he became absolutely insane.
It's not determined that they pulled him off.
I'm sorry.
They say he pulled him off. And
I heard that, yeah,
it's not an accepted public fact that they were done with him. There's a lot, they say that he was done with them and that he would,
that he himself pulled him off and
that
decided,
Trump decided not to go on.
oh, poor baby. Okay, sorry. Whatever.
Other questions or thoughts? Tom Kilbane, looked like you were doing exercises for a while. That's notable to see. You could lead our senior center exercise class. You're muted. You're still muted. Anyway, we'll hear from you, I'm sure.
He's in Ohio.
Oh, he's in Ohio. Well,
Yeah.
technology will defeat him. So, other questions and thoughts on Hello in Ohio? Other questions and thoughts before we move on to our vice presidential sweepstakes? So we have two other segments. Somebody tell me what time it is. It's about 5 to 1, 5 to 2.
Yeah, 7 minutes to 2.
So there are 6 candidates who have been vetted. So we're going to take a vote, and you're voting not who you want. This first vote is who you think it will be. It'll be tomorrow because they have, or today, because they have to go on the road together next week. So as you know, the candidates being vetted are Pritzker, Buttigieg, Tim Walz, Beshear, Mark Kelly, and Josh Shapiro. So I'm going to say those names. And if you think that's who's going to be nominated, please raise your hand. Now, Susan and Marcy, that would mean you'd have to come on for us to do that. Or you could, okay, I'm going to go slow to see if any of you want to show your face.
Yeah, or you can either raise your hand or you can push the little hand button and we'll count that.
Yeah, okay, that's a deal. You don't even have to come on. You can just do put the thumb up that they have. Okay, how many of you think it will be Pete Buttigieg? How many think it will be J.B. Pritzker? How many think it will be Tim Walz? My goodness, 1. How many think it will be Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky? 1. How many think it will be the astronaut Mark Kelly? 1, 2, 3. How many think it will be Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so now let's go back and say what we want. If we were Kamala Harris and we're going to select not necessarily who is most likely to win Wisconsin, but who we most would like to see vice president, how many would choose Pete Buttigieg? How many would choose J.B. Pritzker? 4 for Buttigieg. How many would choose Andy Beshear? How many would choose Mark Kelly? I'm voting. How many would choose Tim Walz? So I think our leader, did I get through everybody? I think our leader that time around was no, I'm blanking. Who got the full
Well,
vote?
Buttigieg, I think. Yeah, or
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah,
I didn't
4.
hear you mention Shapiro.
Oh, how many for Josh Shapiro?
Shapiro?
Okay, another 4, or 3. Okay, so it's up there in Shapiro, not a heavy vote for the astronaut. At any rate, this is my thinking of it. Right as Biden looked like he was post-debate, when they were doing strategy, they were almost publicly going from a swing state strategy to a blue wall strategy. As you know, remarkably, if you won states that we've been winning, namely Virginia, New Hampshire, New Mexico, then what you need to do to get to 270 is win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and one of the Nebraska electoral votes. That gets you to 270. That's the blue wall strategy. That's why Hillary was pretty sure she couldn't lose, at least till Comey made his announcement, because she thought that would hold. We had won those for years, and we lost them by very little, and we lost our momentum. So the blue wall strategy is for vice president is pick somebody that can help you in. So we took care of Nebraska. We'll win that electoral vote because when the Nebraska legislature tried to change that, the Maine legislature said, if you change in Nebraska, we'll change the statewide in Maine. So that would have taken the electoral vote back. So these three states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, were running even or ahead in all three. And the strategy for vice president, as you know, is pick somebody who you would think would especially be helpful to you in those three states, even if you're thinking there was somebody else that would be more helpful to you in Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, or Nevada. You would just go for the gold first. And if you were to do that, the argument is that maybe it's Beshear because he's from Kentucky, but during the UAW strike, he walked the picket line with the UAW, which is nothing but a gold-plated UAW credential. And meanwhile, as Reed Price says, Mark Kelly is in a little trouble over late sponsorship of a labor organizing bill. So if you're into a blue wall strategy, maybe it's Beshear, maybe it's Josh Shapiro, because maybe he doesn't help you all that much in Michigan and or Wisconsin, but he helps you a little bit with the youth vote on Gaza. 18 for 35-year-olds are pissed off at Biden, a little bit on Harris over Gaza, and Shapiro's a big critic of Bibi. So it's that or Beshear. But what if you still want to, and that doesn't mean you're giving up on those other states. If you give up on those other states, Kamala is saying, I'm not giving up on Arizona. I'm just picking Josh Shapiro to win Pennsylvania for sure, because I'm comfortable in Nebraska. All of a sudden, I win Wisconsin and Michigan, and I got 270 electoral votes because I held on to Virginia and New Hampshire. That's pretty sexy stuff. So why would you do anything else? Well, because you'd like to have the Senate and the House of Representatives be from your party. So somewhere in that brain trust, Eric Holder and elsewise, somebody is thinking, you know what? I think we're going to hold a blue wall, but I'd like to have more reinforcements. I'd like to have somebody who helps me win in North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Why not pick an astronaut from a border state who knows how to talk about immigration and was a pilot whose wife was shot? I mean, I'm saying there's a lot to say about Mark Kelly. The downside of Mark Kelly is what Reed said about whether organized labor is all in, which you want in the blue state in Midwest. And the other downside is he's not a governor. Kamala would like to run with the governor, not least because you've got to run the government. And senators have notoriously have no experience in running the government. So that's my view. I think either a Mark Kelly or Josh Shapiro, depending on what polling Kamala is getting from all those swing states. There's some new polling averages on 538 that make us competitive in all of them. And we were scarily uncompetitive in some of them with Joe. So I think it's basically comes down to, do Josh Shapiro is a safer bet, as is. Here's the problem with Beshear. To be elected governor in Kentucky, he has undoubtedly said some things that Walz has not said, and Shapiro has not said. that are policy differences with Kamala. You wouldn't have that with any of the other candidates. They're not going to be able to drive between them, but they would be with Beshear. You don't get elected as a moderate Democrat governor of Kentucky by seizing on all of Kamala Harris's and Joe Biden's ideas. So I think that's why it won't be Beshear. If it's it won't ultimately be Tim Walz, because they're going to wonder what special magic he would have in Michigan and Pennsylvania. I think on the blue wall strategy, it's Shapiro. On the broader strategy, it's Mark Kelly, and we'll know by tomorrow, and we'll know whether we were right or wrong. Any further comments on Vice President Sheila?
Much as I would love Pete,
What?
obviously, as much as I would love to have it Pete, and I know it's not going to be Pete, but I can still dream sometime, you know. As far as I think Mark Kelly, and he's got a wife who is a winner. So, you know, Gabby will go out and she'll campaign as well. And it's,
Yeah.
to me, I think that also we have to look at who gets along with them the best. The two of them get along the
Yeah,
best.
she might have magic with one and not the other. Actually, Josh Shapiro, when she was, I think he was already AG in Pennsylvania when she was still AG in California. I think she's one of his AG. In fact, I know Josh Shapiro is one of her AG attorney general buddies, so that's probably ways. Of course, she knows Kelly from the Senate, so although he just started, so she didn't serve in the Senate with him. He just started when she started. Yes, Laura.
Oh, I love, I mean, Mark Kelly's resume and everything and all he brings to the table. But what about the concern about possibly losing his Senate seat in a special election? That's the thing that sort of keeps me awake.
Well, it's interesting because say Gallego beats Kari Lake, which looks like it's going to happen, and say we lose the West Virginia seat, which we're certain to lose, and say John Tester wins in Montana. Guess how many senators we have? 50. Guess how many we need? 50. So it's a non-trivial event to possibly give up a Senate seat. So I'm caught short because I know the Democratic governor gets to appoint the replacement. So isn't the special election all the way till 2 years from now? Does anybody know? I don't think it's during the 2 years. I think the appointee serves 2 years.
Yeah, I think it is 2 years.
So I think
But
that's less.
I'm just thinking the long game.
Yeah, well, it's not too long, 2 years. You want to. So I would say this about that. Right now, of the senators up, we have 2/3 of them because 2018 was a good year. I don't know what the numbers are in terms of vulnerable Republican senators 2 years from now, but Camp Law does. So if it's all of 2 years, I think that would be concerning, but not disqualifying. If there was a Republican governor there, of course, there'd be no chance that would happen. But I think they might be willing to take the pluses of Mark Kelly for 2 years to put themselves at risk 2 years from now. I mean, that's, we had both the House and the Senate with Biden, with, Manchin being the swing vote and using Collins and Murkowski a little bit. So we would be duplicating Biden's 2 years by having narrow margins if we could win back the House. Yes, Sheila. You're muted.
Okay. Do you have any indication, David, that they're going to go for a 50 state campaign, unlike what Hillary did not do?
No, I don't think they will. I mean, it's nice to have when the Constitution and the Electoral College are still there. I think you want to be ahead in the popular vote, and you want to go for a 25 state campaign to help your swing district congressional races. There are swing races in Texas and one in Oklahoma. I mean, so you can't ignore all the rest of those states because you want to help your Montana is a great example. You want to have a presidential campaign in Montana because you don't want Tester to have to make up 16 points. But that doesn't make it a 50-state campaign. It means you're still not putting up ads in Anchorage or Bismarck.
So they might go to Wisconsin, unlike what she did not do.
Well, I mean, that wasn't a 50-state strategy. That was I am too confident on the blue wall strategy.
I know, and it was
I mean,
ridiculous.
that's a totally different thing. It didn't say they made a mistake. Clearly, I think subjecting us to 8 years of this insanity of having, I think when Trump loses in November, I don't think he's an announced candidate for president when he's in 2028. I did a poll for our hiking group and I said, who's the strong candidate for 2032? The governor of Maryland, Westmore, or other, and I couldn't get him in. That's the president in 2032.
Well, just as the aside, I understand that Pete is thinking about running for governor after Gretchen gets through it in Michigan.
Oh, that's right. They moved there. No, that's
Yep.
interesting.
In 28.
Yeah, it wouldn't be 28. It'd be 26.
Or 26. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
26.
So, other comments on all of this before I do our last segment? Jake.
I was a public school teacher doing equity work for 30 plus years. And one of the issues that I have that I'm having a hard time ignoring is Josh Shapiro's voting with the Republicans on like school vouchers and things like that. And it's an issue for teachers where it was a thing where it was about funding private schools, religious-based schools. And
Was he in the legislature before he was attorney general?
I don't know. All I know is that he supported, I mean, this is.
I wouldn't be voting with because before he was governor, he was attorney general, but it might be some role as attorney general in giving them comfort.
I just know he sided with the Republicans on the school voucher issue, which is a big red flag for.
Yeah, it is for me. That isn't to say that I would walk away from the ticket, but you know that Eric Holder's running a process that vets all those issues.
Hasn't he also made some troubling comments about the Palestinians and?
If he has, I don't know. He's a critic of Netanyahu.
A quick internet search that he has been vocal in supporting some sort of a taxpayer-funded private school voucher program as governor. But of course, the other part of it, which is what I was getting at earlier, is that Kamala did a great big hug of teachers already.
Mhm.
And she may have to ask for a little latitude in her strategy and say, he's the vice president.
Yeah,
not the
that would be
president.
true of Labor and Mark Kelly. So sometimes you go to your constituency and you say, okay,
and you can't ignore the kind of the relationship, that she and Josh Shapiro seem really comfortable together on the stage, and that I think that's going to matter. It would love to be a fly on the wall if she's having these one-on-ones, doing her own face-to-face vetting over the next couple of days.
I think if all other things, I think she's decided by now, but if all other things are equal, you would select the person you're most comfortable with. It's so funny because that happens so rarely. Obama selected Biden because he knew he needed a veteran on the Hill, and that's why he did it, and that was a smart move because Obama didn't necessarily like calling senators every day. Lyndon, of course, chose Humphrey for the same. Well, he didn't need the Hill, but he chose Humphrey for his then liberal wing. Trump named Pence because he unwisely thought he would be Trump's lackey, and he was for 3 years and 364 days. He just slipped on the banana peel on day 365 and upheld the Constitution. Good for him. we'll see. We're gonna know, and we'll see how wise we were, but I think we're down to, I don't think it's gonna be Tim Walz, who she likes, and a lot of Congress likes him a lot. He was a congressman before governor. I think it's gonna be either Shapiro or Kelly, and I still think it's gonna be Kelly, although there's a lot of press saying Shapiro has cleared his weekend schedule. Is that not a hint? But I don't
Well,
know.
yeah,
Who knows?
although as we've been online, there was a, I think it's a New York Times article that they've confirmed that she's planning to hold 6 interviews this weekend.
Wow.
So she's going to interview all of the people you just
Then
named.
they've all cleared their schedules for all of
Yeah.
next week because they
For-
gotta go with her. What do you think? You say to your kid, I can't come to soccer practice next Tuesday. I'm traveling with the president. I'm running for vice president. Don't you understand? Dad, you promised. So it's tough stuff. Last segment, just very quickly. As I mentioned, my friend asked me this morning how I was feeling with him sending a large check to Amy Klobuchar. I urged him not to do that. She is ahead by 14 points. The cardinal rule for our giving is not to give money to people who don't need money. Maria's my friend. Don't give Maria Cantwell money. If you have, that's fine. That's good. She's worth it. Don't give her any more, please. So that's the cardinal rule. The other cardinal rule is more painful. You know, back when Beto was running, he was a good investment. He almost won. So you give money to people who are going to get 48% in hopes they get 50. But I think Jaime Harris had never had a chance to beat Lindsey Graham. And I think a lot of us spilled some dough there because we were so mad at Lindsey Graham. So we have to be careful. We have to do our research on the candidates, see whether they need money and whether they're going to win anyway, and or whether they're going to lose anyway. That's a painful truth. So I would definitely do that. On that front, even though she's not a mainline Democrat, I would give, if I was giving directly to candidates, I would open up the vault and pour it into the 3rd district in Southwest Michigan, because Marie Gluesenkamp Perez is going to vote to make Hockey Jeffries speaker again if he has the majority. And I would do that every day of the week. She's got a tough race. Nobody thought she was going to win the first time around, and she did. So the second cardinal rule is, if you're doing, is think about who you're giving to, if you're giving, besides individual campaigns or the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee or something. Think about who is getting evidence and jurying things. So there's a mid-level intermediary like Swing Left who've identified 8 races, and you can give them to all of them at once. And that's a choice. And you know they're not giving money to somebody who doesn't need it or who can't win. So there's intermediaries that do that. There's Focus for Democracy that some of you support. And that's an analytical test on the cost effectiveness of local organizing strategies. So that's interesting. But you're doing your own test. I mean, the reason I'm plugging Mi Familia Vota, which works in 8 states without pause, is I've looked at them and I've talked to them and I've had Zooms with them and I believe in them. So if you're not giving to candidates, you might be giving to single issue efforts. So that or demographic specific efforts. So you're doing choice, and there's a lot of good national and local organizations that are fighting for choice. You can even go to Arizona and Florida where it's on the ballot and support those campaigns, because those are going to help Democratic candidates. Or you could do 18 to 35 and do something like Rock the Vote. You could do a demographic like Latinos and do Mi Familia Vota. Or you could do local organizers in a single state. You could look at Common Power's website and see who they've been partnering with in those states. You could look at my blog and see who I have mentioned. And those are all alternatives. Then thirdly and lastly, a lot of us are writing postcards, making calls. A few of us are going places. There, you're just picking the right intermediary. You don't want to show up someplace to knock on doors and have nobody know what the hell they're doing. That's why Common Power is so powerful, because they do know what they're doing. With postcards, you want veteran postcard doers. If you've been doing postcards, you're comfortable with who they're doing with, but it's all in the list they're sending you. And you don't want somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, because then your postcards have less impact. So we're subjecting ourselves to a test of the wisdom of our volunteering and our fundraising. You want to go someplace in Washington, go to the 3rd District for sure, or get involved in one of the local campaigns. We got one here. I'm just going to say that as good of a legislator, excellent legislator that Emily Randall was, I take offense at dark money supporting cryptocurrency, giving $1.5 million to dark money ads for Emily Randall. I think that's wrong. It's disproportionately affecting the race. I would vote for Hillary France at a microsecond once Emily Randall lets that happen. Her campaign told me, well, we legally can't even talk to those people. And you know what? She can't, but she could publicly disown them in a microsecond, and she should. That's wrong. That's an entire campaign's budget from cryptocurrency lobby. You think maybe they think they're gaining extra access? I think so. I think it's bad, and I think she should return. Any questions, thoughts, and further thoughts on any of these matters?
I had no idea about that cryptocurrency dark money.
It's in the Seattle Times from last Sunday.
Wow. Okay, I must have missed it.
Yeah, just Google it.
Ed and
Yeah.
I just said we were getting ready to do our ballot, and I said, let's wait until after we've listened to David today. Well, that last little tidbit.
Well, you know, if they ever watch this, they won't be pleased with me. She's a good state senator. These are two good candidates. I really am offended by that.
So you didn't mention Movement Voter Project?
Yeah, so that, besides Focus for Democracy, is someone else who subjects candidates and organizations to extreme thoughtful analysis as to the efficacy of their efforts.
We really like them. They're the local boots on the ground, small organizations with a local track record, and they get the people to vote that we need to vote that usually vote.
Yeah, so in my blog, I mentioned both of them in the same paragraph.
I think of these suggestions that you make on those as sort of like the index funds of politics. It's like, I'm just going to go with an area because, for example, knowing exactly which candidate is going to make a difference is more analysis than I'm in a position to really do.
Well, and then of course you can trust the intermediary. And it's funny because right after the debacle in 2016, Indivisible was everywhere. They did a marvelous organizing handbook, and they still do major work across America. Swing Left came in and started advising, and people thought, who the heck are you? But they're good. They're very good on congressional races. And then there's, of course, the projects that look for try and turn state legislative seats. So a good time. Let's hope a month from now we'll have great things to say from each other. If we're weeping copiously a month from now, that's not a good sign. No weeping.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the time, the analysis. I know you put a lot of work into this before you show up, and we are grateful.
Reed gave you a link to my blog. If any of you are not on that list and want to get it, that's the Google site, and it gets sent out by eBlast. So you could click on that if you want me to send it to you on a regular basis.